Thanks so much for listening. Before getting into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know that I would love to add value to you, your organization, and those you serve through speaking, training, professional development, or coaching. Over the last year, I've been fortunate to work with those in higher education, pre-K-12, and more recently, the corporate space. To learn more, visit my website at cjleadership.com or send me an email at chris@cjleadership.com. I can't wait to hear from you, and now on to our episode. Welcome back, everyone, to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. I'm always so grateful when you take time out because, the best way to improve an organization is to improve the leader, so you're not only improving yourself, but those you serve. Whether you're listening or watching, I thank you. And today I'm so excited. We have Dr. Ann Schmitz as our guest. She is a up-and-coming leader, department chair in the higher ed world. Just to give you a little bit of her background, she is the department chair of engineering and technology at the University of Wisconsin-Stout, where she leads that department and also continues to be involved in her research. Her expertise spans biomechanics, 3D printing, and computational modeling with a focus on applications in prosthetics, orthotics, and exoskeletons. So hopefully I got that right. Ann, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, I tell you, Ann and I have connected for a couple of years now through the Academic Chairpersons Conference, which if you have not attended, or even if you have, those are of our listeners in higher education. It's the best. It's one of the best, if not the best, higher ed leadership conference I've been to. Not just saying this, but the chancellor, Chancellor Frank, that is up there at Ann School, has been an integral part of that organization for years. Therefore, I think that's probably how Ann got connected, and can't say enough about that. Usually summertime is when we put the call out if you want to submit. But overall, let's just get started here, Ann. Why don't you just tell me and our listeners a little bit about who you are and the journey that brought you to serving as the chair of engineering and technology at the University of Wisconsin-Stout.
Yeah, so I went to UW-Madison for biomechanics, and my work was really in how to do ACL surgeries, and I just really liked how the body works. And then I did my postdoc work at University of Kentucky, and then of course you always transition to a faculty role. So I went to Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania, and that learned a lot in that position. And then a position opened up here in Wisconsin, and it was just a great way to get back home where I'm from and be with family. And UW Stout has just been a fantastic fit. And then kind of as I've progressed as a faculty, I wanted a new challenge. So we had our chair who was retiring, and I thought, I think this will be something, just a new challenge to start.
And so I'm glad you mentioned that, and because we know, and you've been to the chair conference enough, that there are two main routes that people come to a department chair job. One is intentional, and one, whether we like it or not, is maybe you didn't set out to do it, but there was an opening. Somebody, as we call in leadership, they tapped your shoulder, said, "We want you to do it." And so talk a little bit then about the extent to which, you had always, if you've always had what I call those leadership leanings, or, how you came to that, and the extent to which you've grown a little bit, probably quite a bit, because our listeners and viewers should know that you've been in the role now about a year. Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
And that is wonderful, and glad to see you are still looking energetic, happy, and you're returning next school year for the job. But what was your journey like in terms of maybe leadership leanings, influences, and then to what extent did that come into play when you got that tap on the shoulder saying, we think you have what it takes to be a leader?
Think so. Some of it comes from my husband, who is in the military, and he's always talking about leadership and guiding people, and so that has just always been a part of our family. We've done scouts, so we've always been the people who are like, no one's in charge. Okay, I'll do it. My husband and I have what we call healing hand, where it just, does anyone need to be on a committee? Oh, okay, yep, that'll be me. And so I always thought it'd be interesting to try. And part of it too was no one else really wanted to do it. I was a little leery because I'm it's like, oh, I'm still new. I just got tenure. I don't know if it should be me, and no one else wanted to do it. So I was like, okay, I will try it. Why not? We've just always been those type of people, I guess.
I love that. like the helium hand. That is, I like that. Very, very appropriate. So with that then, and again, the first year, any new job, any new position is challenging. You learn a lot, you grow. Um, so let's just start there because we have people that might be listening that as they hear this or watch this, they just found out that the upcoming school year, as we record this, we're towards the end of the spring semester. And so this might be the time that people have found out, hey, you're going to do this next year. Or we have people that come to our New Chair Alliance training, and that's always held in February, and they just found out in January that they were the new chair. So as you look back and realize the things that you've learned, maybe you didn't know that you wish you knew, what would some advice be if people are sitting here listening to this, knowing they're going into that role? As somebody who is now experienced and been down that road, probably, fought the good fight and done all those things that we do. Uh, what's some advice that you would give to those people, especially if they're a little uneasy and anxious about taking on the department chair role?
Yeah, I would say first, the job is hard because it's a hard job. It's not because you're bad at it. So don't give up. Don't think, oh my God, I'm screwing this up. It's just, it's a hard job. And it's it it will be uncomfortable. You have to be more
Mm.
prepared to deal with uncomfortability. And also it's a huge shift because when you're going up for tenure, you are used to, you have to be on committees, you have to be out, like it is a little bit of the game of being liked. And so you have to transition now of can't lead from a place of being liked. Yes, you want your people to like you want to make connections, but you will have to say no. You will have to have hard conversations. So be prepared for that shift and also treat leadership and department chair, just like you say in your book, like it is your new research area. I had to do a lot of professional development. It's okay if you feel like I've never done this before. Yep, treat it like you would a new research project. Go to conferences, read books.
Wonderful. And again, I told her before we hit record, I'm so thankful when anyone gets my book, certainly somebody that isn't related to me, so I assume they voluntarily bought the book and read it. But honestly, you'd shared that before, and it means a lot to me when people can read that because anything that I write or my background's K-12, whenever I tell future teachers do this, I promise you it's because I probably did the opposite and messed up, right? But what you said, I want to just go down that path, Ann, is be uncomfortable. It's a shift and understand that you really have never done this before. So, gosh, so much to unpack there. Let's start with, oh, and the other thing that she mentioned, and for our higher ed listeners, this is so appropriate, is becoming a titled leader, which oftentimes in higher ed, that chair is that initial, that gateway, right? That first, experience. It's tough, but you're not going to be liked all the time. You're not going to be liked all the time. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that people that dislike you are bad, but you are making decisions that, quite frankly, what's best for the organization, the institution, Certainly where Anne is, she's part of a system. What's best for the, I'll just say the Board of Regents, the system, might not be the best for Dr. So-and-so in office 215 down in the corner, right? And that's okay. So let's go there. What were some of the lessons, and more importantly, now that you've done this, the advice that you would have about getting over that initial shock of I'm not always going to be liked. And as you said, unlike going up for promotion and tenure, where to some extent people have to, we'll say, approve, acknowledge, i.e., like, it is completely different. And what are some things that you found were helpful?
I am really fortunate to have an awesome dean's team. So my dean and my associate deans, I don't think I could do this without them. You need a team of people who have your back. And when I had talked to my dean initially, I'm like, oh man, I'm making some hard decisions. I had to say no to this equipment and ask some really hard questions, and never done this before. My dean said, actually, you kind of have. Think of them as your students. You've been an instructor, students complain, and you get used to weeding out kind of what is an actual complaint and what is just grumbling. Think of your department members, the instructors, your faculty, more educated students. So, yep, you're just trying to be fair, equitable, look out with a greater lens, and not everyone's going to be liked. So I think that advice was super, super helpful when someone had a complaint to be like, okay, how would I handle this if it was a student? And also got some really great advice from my provost too of, well, you also have to balance you may be saying no, but what do your bosses think of you? Does the dean's team think you're doing a good job because you are funneling in a part of the bigger piece? Is how do your department members think you're doing? And just really trying to balance all that, but really thinking more of the bigger picture.
Wow, great stuff. Thank you for sharing. You're right. Having a team that has your back, that mentors you, that's a lot of it right there, because that not only are they giving you guidance, but you don't have this sense of fear as, I can't mess up.
Yep.
The other thing that you said, Anne, is, and the part of me that still, trains teachers and does leadership coaching in K-12, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, is if you are a teacher of any kind, you are a leader because you do all of those things. It
Yep.
might be in an isolated area, but a professor, if you're doing your job, you handle conflict, right? You have to cast a vision and say, this is how we're going to get there, and this is how I know we got there. That's called curriculum. That's called assessment.
Yep.
And so what Ann said, I want that to resonate with our listeners, because if you're an educator at any level, how you handle humans is how you can handle humans. And sometimes when I've said that, they're like, well, are you saying that I should, I was a first grade teacher. I'm not going to treat adults like first grader. I'm not saying that. But and tell me if I'm wrong or if you found additional things, but it's just that concept of, first of all, address the behavior, not the person. Be clear and kind in expectations. Let them know this is how we're going to get there. This is what will happen, if A, B, and C occurs. And this is how we're going to hold everyone accountable. If you can do that with students in your class, in your lab, in whatever area you teach in, you can do that with just about any human. Have you found that to be true?
Yes, I apply the same concepts, but I don't know why it just seems so foreign or really difficult when you're doing it with people who were at once your peers and your colleagues, because now I am telling Professor Schmitz down in the corner office, I need your curriculum proposal by Monday at 8 a.m. because I need time to review it before it goes to the committee. And if they don't turn it in by 8 a.m., guess who's knocking on their office door to be like, I need that. I wouldn't allow it to be late from a student. It's it's the transition to that now these are your peers. We may have had dinner together when I wasn't chair, and now I'm knocking on your door as a boss and we no longer go out to dinner together. I think that's been another challenge too, is like your circle of friends and being friendly, but you may not be friends because you don't want people to see that others may seem favored. So that's what kind of makes that transition
Mm.
difficult.
Yeah, you're unpacking so many great things for current, new, future leaders. Is that it can't your relationships will change, right? It's fair. I'm not saying that you're going to lose friends, but I am telling you that your relationship with your colleagues, especially if you started in your position or your school, if you're an internal transfer or hire, your relationships will change, and that's okay. But I agree, it can be hard. For a number of years, I worked at an institution where I was a student in the department I was in. So, it was hard for me to not call people doctor and use their first name. So I can attest that when you actually have to have a tough conversation, that's another layer to get through. Um, how do you then, and we'll just go here, and then I want to get into some other great stuff you're doing. Um, how have you gone about um, handling, and with anyone, student, colleague, stakeholder, you name it? Conflict happens almost every day in some form. Luckily, it isn't a daily dumpster fire, but it happens in some way. So then, how have you gone about um, taking on that new role of chief problem solver, right? Chief conflict operator. That in your daily life as a professor probably wasn't there as much. How have you gone about addressing conflict as a leader?
Ooh, so first, a lot of mistakes in the beginning, right? And just reminding people I'm new, so please help me out if I screw up. So even practicing with people that I know and respect really well, so that they could give me feedback to be like, that didn't go well. Here's what I'd recommend next time. They've been great. My dean's team. So before I jump into a difficult conversation, especially with someone I don't know that well, I don't know their personality, they've been really helpful. And a surprising one is actually AI. So there's Google, Gemini, I like, and character AI. And so you can train them to be what you want. So I'll be like, okay, here's some books I like about leadership. I want to do some role playing. Can you play the difficult professor who doesn't want to take no for an answer? Or can you be like confrontational and tell me that I'm an awful chair and I'm doing a bad job? And so I practice role playing it out so that I don't get as nervous. And I'll be like, hey, was that a good way to say that? And sometimes AI will be like, well, it's really direct. I want to soften it. So I practice. And I practice with AI so I don't make my husband or my colleagues nuts by all the practice.
I love that. Well, I should have expected somebody with an engineering background to figure out a great way to engineer AI. If you're listening to this, if you're driving, pull over, make a note. If you're on the treadmill, stop. I don't want you to fall off. If you're walking the dog, whatever you're doing as you're listening or watching, that is wonderful right there. Because, first of all, I'm an advocate for role playing difficult conversations first. Don't violate confidentiality, but for many reasons, right? If anything, when we go into that conflict, we need to be using the rational part of our brain. And if we haven't role played, we're also going to be in that fight or flight stage, and it doesn't go well for anyone. But what she said about AI, and we're going to get into some of her other great things she's doing, that is excellent stuff right there. Because really, think about that. It's going to tell you, and I use it every day in some way, shape, or form. And I would encourage everyone listening. Again, don't enter people's names, but as she said, prompt it to where you name the scenario. I'm a first year leader. I'm talking to a senior faculty member. This is what they did. This is the policy. How give me a script that is kind, direct, etc.
Mhm.
Um, that is wonderful. I would encourage people, if you have to send maybe a less than desirable email. AI is a great way to take the edge off, especially if you're still a little bit, amped up about it when you send it. So that's a great thing right there. So if you're listening, Dr. Ann Schmitz is I think she's gonna be the person now to help leaders with conflict management through AI prompt engineering. That's wonderful. Um, and so along those lines, I mean, let's just go into it because one of the things that you are doing very well is AI and leadership. And so you've mentioned them. Um, but wow, can you just expand upon that? What are some other AI tools that you have found that, in addition to role playing, have also helped you as a department chair, bigger picture as a leader?
Yeah, so first I'll give a plug. We just had a journal article accepted for the journal, The Department Chair, where I kind of list out these tools and how I've used them. And I focus more on free tools so that really any chair can use them regardless of your institutional budget. So hopefully that'll come, I think, in fall. But another one that I really like and I've brought up to meetings is called Notebook LM. And it's another Google tool. And what I did was I downloaded our institutional handbook, all of our APs, policies, procedures, our department bylaws. And so I can ask all of my policy questions. I'll be like, what is our policy on office hours? I have a person who, here's a situation. Can you tell me which policies that I should be referring to when I email them? And be like, A per AP 77, you need 4 office hours. So that is really helpful with just digesting the bombardment of information that you get as chair, or you have to know all of these, what's the process for evaluation? So AI has just been really helpful for digesting that. Or another way I've used it is I have a bunch of syllabi. Can you tell me if they conform to the syllabus policy? Are they missing anything? Oh, they're missing the course, the number of credits, just anything that has just a ton of text that you're like, I don't have time, boil it down.
As you're saying that, I would assume those of us that have a rather robust or on-campus presence, I haven't done this, but I would assume if you're trying to create a new class and find out when will it cause the least disruptions, load the schedule into AI, right? Load the schedule into AI and say, this is what I'm looking for. Give it a few guidelines, like most students take XYZ class on Tuesday, Thursday afternoon. I don't know if you've done that, but as you said that, that's something as a chair that I'm always constantly trying to manage. Is if I have a new class or we need to make a tweak, as everyone knows, it's not just one domino, it's a lot of dominoes. And
Yeah.
so that I really like that. And again, Notebook LM. I like what you said there about finding the policy. If you're listening and you're a little unsure about AI or whatever, here's what I've told colleagues in higher education. And if you're like me and have been in higher ed a while, if in the old days you would have given it to a GA and said, come back in a week with this, think about AI that way. If you're uncomfortable and want to take your first step, right, is,
Mhm.
for example, last year, I wrote an article and I'd put it in Chicago, and the editor wanted it in APA. Now, normally I probably would have found a GA and said, hey, I'll give you a couple weeks, do this. I went into to AI, one that I subscribed to, and it did not take long at all to convert everything to APA as opposed to Chicago. It took
Yep.
me a few tweaks, but it took maybe a half hour out of my life, where in the old days I probably would have asked a GA, right? So thank you for bringing that up. What are some other things then that you have found um, um, that in leadership, whether it's AI, whether it's, you mentioned books that you read, professional development, what are some other things that have contributed to your development or just your overall leadership philosophy, especially over the past year?
Yeah. So when I first went to the Academic Chairs Conference, I was I wasn't even chair yet. I was just applying and wanted to run. And that's where I learned more about you should have a leadership philosophy. So I really liked the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott and that podcast because it was all about how to give feedback. And something our department really values are relationships between each other and with our students. You can't have that without conversations, and it involves both positive and maybe constructive feedback. So, a lot of my leadership philosophy has been on how do you show care for individuals? How do you give really constructive feedback, again, on behavior, not the person? And how do you give that feedback in a way that shows that you care?
So love that. And I'll put the link not only to your, bio and your social media presence, but I think we'll also put the link to Radical Candor. What is one, I guess, nugget you could give us from Radical Candor, that if typically you would deliver the message by saying, "Hey, Ann, sorry, you're now gonna, your schedule's completely changed. Have a nice weekend." Going from that to what is just a preview or a taste of Radical Candor that you could share for those listening and watching?
One thing I found helpful is they give a model for feedback, and that's something I use AI to.
Hmm.
It's called the SBI model of feedback. So to give a good piece of advice to someone, what is the situation, the context? What is the behavior you noticed? Hey, I noticed you came in late to our department meeting. And what is the impact? The impact is we didn't have quorum and we had to start late. So I really love how they talk about the impact of the behavior so that someone can't be like, well, what does it matter? Who cares? This was the impact. So it's a nice way to frame feedback.
I like that situation, behavior, impact, which again is something that would be a good practice with students. Came to a class, a lab late, or a department meeting. I love that. This is a situation. You're addressing the behavior, not the person. And I really like what she shared there is oftentimes people really don't realize they're not being negative or mean. They may not realize the impact that what they think is a minor action, how that affects the organization. And so I'll ask you, how has that gone over when you have used that model to address what would otherwise be maybe a more uncomfortable conversation?
Both, well, sometimes I'll have someone be like, I had no idea. I am so sorry. And sometimes not well. I'm a tenured professor. I've been here for 18 years and it's never mattered before. So I also like what Kim Scott says in her podcast of just because you use this model of feedback and these tools, this is not a guarantee of emotional Novocaine. It doesn't mean I'm doing the right thing, so no one should be mad. All it means is you can feel good about yourself, like, hey, I did the right thing. You're upset. I don't need to take on your upset and feel bad for you. You're allowed to be upset, and we'll talk about that later. So that's another thing I got from her book.
Love that. I've heard of her work in her book, but I convinced me now I need to get into that more. One of my when I do teaching and training, I have 8 relational realities, and one of them is they're allowed. Is people are allowed, and you're right. If you are dealing with humans, there is hardly ever 100%, just do this and everyone will respond the same way. So yes, I'm giving you permission as a leader. You're still going to fail, but I love what you said there. And at the end of the day, though, you know as a leader that you treated them with respect, you were kind, you were fair, and let's just say it, you were in line with policy, whatever that means. And so what's the worst that could happen? If they choose to get upset, fine, they can be upset. You didn't treat them poorly. I guess anybody in this day and age could file a complaint, but like you said, is you know that you were in line with what you told them and what you were expecting. And at the end of the day, there's always that, that distribution curve in the population we serve that despite our best efforts, you know what? I don't know if you're ever going to have 100% buy-in. But you know what? I love what you said is you as a leader, you still made the decision. This is who you are as a leader. And we're all our walking, talking billboard as the chair of whatever. You still treated them the same, regardless of how they were going to respond. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a very important, and thank you for mentioning that. There's so much great stuff out there. It's still not going to work 100% of the time. I wish it would. You're dealing with people. We're very unpredictable and variable. What are some other things that you have found? You mentioned early on when we started the podcast that I mean, obviously your background is impressive with, you chair an engineering department, biomechanics, 3D printing, computational modeling. You have a lot of expertise. Um, Knowing that, what were some things that you found helpful that were more specific to leadership?
I think a lot of it was the people aspect. As an engineer, I love math. I'm great at math. I can do numbers. So it was really expanding the circle of communication, personal relationships. And the biggest one for me was the people pleasing and allowing people to be upset, sit with that uncomfortableness. And it, I think that was a huge personal growth for me.
Well, and I always like to ask people this in higher ed, because the cool thing about universities is we get to work with people with diverse backgrounds, right? I mean, where else would someone with my background that studied foreign language, bilingual education, get to connect and learn from somebody with an engineering background? I'm a foreign language major and I had to pronounce a pronunciation on some of those words beforehand to make sure I said them right. Okay. Um, because of that, we all are uniquely positioned to lead because everyone's discipline has something that gives us an edge. What have you found as an engineer that actually helped you as a leader?
I am really good, or I really shouldn't say good. I really enjoy doing the data analytics. Like you said about the schedule, I wrote my own code to check for conflicts in rooms and within instructor schedules. And I used our course demands to make sure I have enough numbers, enough sections. And for budget, I track our spending rates to know if we're on track to be over or under budget. So I have found that to be a strength that then I go and share in our department chair meetings when someone says, "Hey, I'm having a really hard time with scheduling." I'll be like, "Well, let me show you what I did. Here's some Excel pivot tables." And I'll say, "I'm having a really hard time with attendance policies and AI policies." And then they'll share, "Oh, here's some really great wording out of the communications department." So you're right. Like everyone has been really great in just sharing what their strengths are.
I'm glad you said that, and I'm really glad you're in an environment where that's how it happens, because again, those of us in higher ed, even though part of our day to days, we still get siloed. I have to remind myself, and I'm just going to say this for the listeners, there are people on your campus right now, regardless of how long you have been there, that if you just sat down and had coffee with them, you are going to connect in ways that you did not know. Whether they're working on research that could help you, that you could collaborate as a leader, I promise you, even though we get stressed, our problems are not unique to our department by and large, right? And so I just always say this even to my own faculty is let's all work to literally and figuratively get out of the office more, because the great thing about working where we are at is even in the smallest university, you have people that know how to market, how to advertise, that are world-class musicians, that are engineers, that all of those things. And not only as leaders, but just as professionals, we can always grow. But I love the fact that you wrote a code to help you with the schedule. See, I would never have thought of that. Okay. But I love that. And that's probably going to help me now. Because I do have friends on campus that are very good at doing that thing. Right. So just to kind of close it out here, Are there anything that you would like to just add or leave with our listeners? Because again, talking to Dr. Ann Schmitz, she chairs the engineering and technology department at University of Wisconsin-Stout, finishing up her first year, doing a great job, has a lot of natural leanings and tendencies and leadership. Anything that you would just like to either add or expand upon before we close out the show?
I think I'll just reiterate what I said before. This job is hard because it's hard. It's not because it doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. And focus or remember the days that were rewarding. When someone says, hey, I got this grant, or I published this paper, or thank you for buying me this piece of lab equipment. And hold on to those. I like to think like Inside Out, where those core memories kind of blink up. Save that as a core memory or write it down. I have a whole board of just thank you notes.
I'm going to do that more too. Is yes, you are in a hard job. I love that. It's hard because it's hard. And leaders, we earn our money on the hard days because, like you said, I would do the job for free on the days when people say thank you for helping me. When I get to do all the fun things that chairs get to do. But yeah, I'm just gonna as we close out, if you're listening to this, I don't care what your title is, whether you're a formal leader or not. Every job has its hard moments. It's okay to be intentional and share those good memories, because whether it's keeping a stack of the thank you emails or notes or whatever, because those are the times where you know that you are making a difference, and I tend to believe those are more impactful long term in somebody's life than the temporary disappointment of sharing you had to change something on their schedule, etc. And so I really appreciate that. I'm going to start doing that more in my own leadership journey, because yes, the job is hard, but there are those moments where it's rewarding, and it's rewarding in ways like you said, Ann. You might have been the only person, big picture, that could have created a culture and climate and leadership to where that person got that equipment, to where the climate was just right for them to write that grant. And so whether it's you or other leaders, don't underestimate the culture you're creating to where those things can grow and flourish. Well, Ann, I tell you what, this has been wonderful. It's always great to connect, and I know that we will continue certainly to connect through, like I said at the beginning, the Academic Chairpersons Conference. Get it on your schedule. Google Academic Chairpersons Conference, you will find it. So, before we close out, any final comments, notes, or advice to give to our chairs out there?
Listen to the podcast and buy Chris's book.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even pay her to say that, friends, but I'm so glad that she did. Well, hey, I do really appreciate that, and it is my goal that adding value, that we can add value to those that are in the position, because there are people that have everything it takes, and if taking something from what Ann said today or something that you read elsewhere is what gives you that motivation to keep going, then hey, it's been worth it. So thank you so much, Ann. Thank you to our listeners. Best of luck. Hope this added value, and we will see you next time.